This week is about asset investigations. No fluff, just a lot of information for you. Hi, I'm Larry Kaye with ShadowAnyone.com, and I'm the creator of the Investigator's Ultimate Guide series, which is premium private investigator training from someone who's been there and done that. I'm going to give you a lot of sources for asset investigations in this video, and no particular order. Almost just there's a lot of things that I like to share just as I'm talking across the table at a diner to from one investigator to another. Almost a stream of consciousness, but I do have my notes. I'm going to refer to them quite a bit. Just give you source after source and what you can legitimately expect to find there. Now, the first thing about asset investigations that you have to know is watch out for the scams. This is not something that is just like easy to pay someone and have it done. Good news for you as an investigator, because people want that. They just want that solution. So if you have this skill set, if you can do asset investigations, then they just want to call you, have you do it, and forget about it, because that's what everybody wants. Just pay and have it done well, done professionally, and done legally. There are severe restrictions on some asset investigation techniques that used to be common back in the day, 20 years ago for sure, maybe as little as 10 or 12 years ago. So another thing you need to watch out for is the legality. You cannot, in the U.S., pretext a bank or financial institution for information about an account. You used to be able to do this. This was one of our standard tools, would be to call a bank posing as the account holder and fish around for the information. Generally, the two things you were frequently interested in was an account number and the amount, how much money they had. And that was relatively easy to get. Federal laws have changed, and if you read them, they're really locked down. There's no wiggle room. There's no loophole for you on this. Even asking someone to do this is a crime, pretexting a financial institution. But, go back again and look at what were the two key things we were mostly interested in back then, an account number and an amount. Because when you're working for someone who has a legitimate judgment from a court, and all that means is they've won, they're entitled to the money, they're owed the money, but the court doesn't give them any money. All the court gives them is a piece of paper that says, congratulations, they owe you this much money. Then it becomes trying to find the money and then trying to get the money. A big step for that, where investigators come in, is find the money. And having an account number and an amount is very, very helpful. It's not totally necessary, because once you have the name of the institution, for example, if you just know they bank there, you can do certain things like subpoena information and that kind of stuff, or law firms can. But again, finding those assets. Where does this person have an account? Very, very important. Types of reasons that you might be looking for an account for clients includes judgment recovery, which is like what I just spoke about there. Also, child custody, which again, there are judgment issues there. A lot of times a back due child support payment, a parent owes something. And so, the custodial parent, maybe full-time custodial parent, is owed money from, say, a deadbeat dad or a mom who's taken off and won't pay her fair share. Pick your side, pick your thing. But when they're owed money, it's very difficult to collect that money, because the person who owes it is frequently hiding those assets. So let's go through a bunch of sources for locating those assets. And one source I want to make sure that I'll lead with, because it's just one of my favorites, I want you to know, is divorce records, divorce filings. So maybe you're not a party to the divorce, or your client. Maybe you're someone else. Maybe you're a business. Your client has loaned money or equipment or something, but they've got a judgment against the person. Going in and finding, you as a private investigator, going in and finding the divorce records. A, did the person have a divorce? And B, pulling the file, looking at it. Very, very valuable. You're going to find divorces at the county level. at the courthouse, usually at common pleas or that upper level court. This is not a misdemeanor crime or a minor small claim civil thing. This is a civil thing, but it's usually obviously more serious divorces. If you pull that file, you will find information. What information will you find? A lot of times, especially, well, you're going to find maybe a list of assets because things got divvied up in the divorce. If there were children involved, you've hit the gold mine here, because there's going to be child support enforcement and those types of things, and frequently that's revisited over the years, where a person loses a job, gets a better job, hits the lottery, whatever it might be. So one parent will take another parent back to court to modify the child support. And man, I will tell you, I have personally many times pulled divorce files that are 2 file folders thick, just like thick like a phone book. If you remember what a phone book is like, I mean, just years and years of things. Because you did a divorce when a kid is 3 years old. You still got 15 more years, a decade and a half of hashing out things, and the parents are constantly coming back to the court to modify that child support. So divorce records, good source of information for asset searching. While you're there at the courthouse, civil litigation. Has the person been sued, or are they suing someone? And again, don't miss both sides of this. Kind of like when you're looking for someone skip tracing, you may look at criminal records, but also take a look to see if they've been a victim of anything, because there'll be information there as well. Same thing with these civil litigations. Have they sued anyone? And did they win a judgment? Did they get some money? Are there... And again, when you pull the file itself, go to the courthouse, pull the file, you'll see things like maybe even like what bank account the funds were transferred to. If they won a suit, you will find things if they lost, where the opposing party has had them fill out maybe an interrogatory with things like employer and assets. You can find that stuff right in those files. Don't be lazy about this. You're not going to be going to a database service, punching a few keys on the keyboard and getting this information. A database service may be a very quick way to do a wide search of many, many counties to see if there is civil litigation, so you know where to go. But getting yourself down there and pulling the file, you're going to find information. Civil litigation, you're going to find asset information in there. Motor vehicle records, again, license plate and registration information abstracts were shut down years ago by the federal government. They're not public record anymore, but there are exceptions. The key phrase you're interested in here is permissible purpose. And so there's a form somewhere, and you can a lot of times find these online, that you can fill out to request driving, say, record history or motor vehicle information on a person. When you find that form, if you're doing it online, print it out, read the front and back carefully, because there's going to be a list of probably 12 or 15 exemptions, permissible purposes, to get that information. And civil litigation or assets is one of those things. So if you are involved in a case with someone, there will be a line, and you check off that block that it's civil litigation. You put down the case number. Don't lie on this stuff. You get yourself jammed up. But if you have legitimate asset searches or judgment recovery, you may find the block that you can check off and run a motor vehicle search on the person, and boom, they've got a car or a vehicle, maybe a motorhome, a motorcycle. You don't necessarily know what's going to come up. And this is held at the state level, at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles or Department of Motor Vehicles, depending on what state you're in. Take it a little. Watercraft is another one of those things. And again, you look around in your state for where that's registered. Maybe it's wildlife department or something like that. But you're going to find. Might as well look for watercraft as well. Pontoon boat, racing boat, anything like that. I mean, anything more than a canoe is probably something you're interested in. But even a canoe. How's the person transporting it? They've got a trailer probably. I mean, I don't know what level you're digging, but when you're looking to research what assets the person has, You're looking for all that kind of stuff. And your client will want to know. Your client may be dismissive of a canoe that's registered, but put it on there. I mean, you're trying to give a thorough report. You don't know what they want or not, and that's an asset. I'm going to jump away from public records just for a second, intentionally. Just kind of keep it interesting, mix it up, not all the public record stuff in one spot. I'm a huge fan of the public records. But, do a news search, and this is use your favorite social search engine and search through news for the person. You may be surprised at some of the stories that come up. They may have had a business grand opening, that kind of thing. Who knows what might be there, and you might find an asset there. Hate social media. I hate it so much, but use social media. Social media searches for what the person is posting. People love to post, their ID card when they get a job. Oh, I just got hired by this company. Here's my ID card. First of all, if you're an investigator and interested in pretexting and that type of thing, that can be a pretty handy thing to know. Watch the legalities of those types of things. But social media, what's in the background? Is there a house? Is there a car? Are they going on vacation somewhere? Demonstrations of wealth and specifically those assets are things that are going to show up in social media. All right, back to public records, the stuff I love. Don't forget intellectual property. If the person has books like I do, they're getting royalties on sales, things like that. So intellectual property, an intellectual property asset, as I like to refer to these things, being as that's part of my business, it's an asset that you own or build or make and then you sell. The person that you're looking for may have intellectual property. So patents and trademarks is a place to look. That's at the federal level in the United States. And also copyright. Maybe they've, in the Copyright Office, which is at the federal level, maybe they've registered something there. But again, looking at intellectual property, don't forget that there's some value there. Corporate filings in the world of public records. Okay, so does a person own a business? This would be at the Secretary of State's office at the state level. And an interesting thing that's really kind of lost on a lot of people is UUC filings. And this is also at the state level with the Secretary of State. UUC, Uniform Commercial Code, is what the UUC stands for. Again, here's the way to think of it. In the simplest terms, it's dibs. Somebody, a creditor, someone who's owed money, has called dibs on a piece of property, an asset that your person owns. So if they have a business, or even if they don't, a loan company, the creditor, can file a UUC form, Uniform Commercial Code form, with the Secretary of State's office saying, putting on notice, we've loaned money to this person, and as collateral, they've laid down XYZ, whatever the thing might be. Don't miss UUC filings. It's just not something a lot of people know about, and you can find some good information there on assets that your person has. Moving from the state level to federal level, again, let's look. We've talked about automobiles and watercraft, which is held at the state level. At the federal level, aircraft registration. It's really, really unlikely, in a sense, that your person owns an aircraft or multiple aircraft, but you don't want to miss it. That's a heck of a thing. Also consider, and always when you're doing these searches, remember, if your person has a business, which you've discovered either because you knew it, or maybe social media searches, or by searching Secretary of State's office, if they have a business, don't miss that the asset may be held under that business name. And there are ways using trust and LLCs that assets can really be hidden. The more you learn about that and how to funnel it, but it's just like a lot of investigations you do. If you discover that this person has a limited liability corporation, check to see if that LLC is doing business under other names or those types of things. And you have to just tease out every name. So if you were looking for someone who skipped out, if you were doing a skip trace on John Smith, and you found out that he also goes by his middle name, Joseph Smith, then you'd have to start searching by both of those names. If you found out that he commonly runs by the name Pookie, then check that out. And variations and weirdness. I recently was working a criminal thing, and in the lower court, the guy, it was his first name, middle name, last name. It was always filed that way. Every time he got busted for a felony, they flipped it. I have no idea why, but the upper court, completely opposite. They listed everything by middle name, first name, last name. So every search I did, both lower and upper and everywhere, because I don't know what the database service, the public records, I don't know what that particular entity is going to consider his first name. So I have to run him both ways through everything. Don't miss that when you're doing asset searches. As you find different names and different variations, check and look and try. So, automobiles, good example. Maybe not under that person's name, but maybe their company owns a vehicle. There's an asset for you. Real property, real estate, land, buildings, condos, apartments in some places. I mean, New York City, for example, it's common to own an apartment. Real property, check at the county level is your most thorough way to be able to find this. And that's going to be with the there's not always a common name to every single county all across the U.S., but think in terms of like the auditor's office, property records, those types of things. When you're looking for that particular source in your county or in the county where the person was, be careful doing your internet searches, because there's a ton of scam companies who want to pop up and pretend like it'll look initially like they are the actual government office, but they're not. So if you know the exact name of the office that holds these records in your county or the county you're looking, you're going to have a much easier time finding, because just going directly there. Let me add this little kind of in our list of things, a bonus idea. Just like you search by multiple names or variations of the names on a person, don't miss the fact that the person has lived in a variety of areas. There's an address history. And like with skip tracing, work with your address history. Take a look at it. On your asset investigation, there may or may not be a limit, depending on the way the judgment's written or what it is. But you're not necessarily limited to go back 7 years looking for assets on this person. So, if they've lived in the state, say the county where they lost the judgment, if they've lived there for 4 years, you better look at where they lived before that. Was it another county in the state? Was it another state? Did they only live there for 2 years? They may own real property all over the place. Maybe they've got a vacation home down on the beach somewhere in a southern state, but they have their residence that they own up north of the Mason-Dixon line somewhere. So remember these things. Think about it. Where has this person lived? Where did they go to school? Where does their ex live? If they got a divorce in another state, maybe you want to pull the divorce file from that area. Don't get locked into location. You can so easily get burned and miss so much if you get locked into just location. So keeping that in mind, that you have to look everywhere they've basically lived or worked for the last however many years. Real estate, county level is where you check for that. And it's just a wonderful source. Remember, check under their business names, under LLCs, those types of things as well. So you can see, it's kind of obvious now as I talk about these things and mention the little caveats. This is not as simple as just having a checklist of sources, although make a checklist. Maybe make a checklist that you can go down and you don't miss something, even like aircraft or watercraft that you would normally maybe not be concerned about. You may not check those records normally on a skip trace because people are so easy to find in other ways. But have your checklist of resources for assets, but then practice, experiment, do a little bit. I think if you do skip tracing and you're used to tugging on all the loose ends and trying different sources and variations of names and different locations, that's good proving ground for doing an asset investigation. Uh, and if you're willing to do an asset investigation, man, oh man, people will pay for that. That ain't cheap. If I was hiring someone to do an asset investigation for me, if I was outsourcing that, or I needed even for my personal life, any place that's charging less than $1,500, 1,500 US dollars, I'm not even interested. They don't pass the smell test for me of being thorough or good or knowing what they're doing. So think about that. Think about that a lot. I've talked many times about not being a lowball private investigator, but when you are the lowball private investigator, people go, I don't really, how good could it be for that much? So if you're looking to outsource or use a company to help you with asset investigations, because this is a service you want to offer to your clients, it'll kind of set you apart, make you special. There's a lot of PIs that won't touch this stuff at all. If you're outsourcing, don't go cheap on this. The cheap ones, you'll get burned. Make sure you're going with a reputable place. And part of that, just a part of it, is going to be looking at how much they charge. What I've talked about here is not an exhaustive list. It really is just one that I've kind of pulled together, thinking through things that I've done and how I've had success. Remember, wherever you're learning things, make sure the person who's teaching it has created in their own life the result they're promising to create in your life. I've done asset investigations, and I'm telling you, this is the way I've done it, is just paw through one source after another, pulling on leads. Sometimes, many times, going through a divorce file, child custody file, page by page, looking. And sometimes it's this really innocuous, harmless looking, you don't even recognize, but all of a sudden there was a subpoena sent out to a certain bank. There's no other reference to it. Maybe they were ignored. Maybe things changed or got dropped and nobody pushed that. But you got to ask yourself, why was that bank subpoenaed for information? That's a one-page little thing that's going to be in the file of sometimes hundreds of pages. You can be the investigator that finds it by being thorough and going and doing these things. How you do anything is how you do everything. Be thorough and do the investigation well. You can charge appropriately for it, make some good money. Let me know if there's anything I missed that you think is really important, or a source that you particularly like. And in the meantime, this is Larry Kaye with shadowanyone.com. Remember, do the right thing, even if it's the hard thing.